Pretend to be my wife, he said. She was just a waitress hiding behind a tray of champagne glasses. He was a billionaire with enemies closing in. What started as a desperate lie beneath the glow of chandeliers became a dangerous game of heartbeats, headlines, and secrets that refused to stay buried. Hello, family. Welcome to Priska Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future stories. Thank you as you do so. Now sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The air was thick with perfume, money, and secrets. Inside the opulent ballroom of the Blackwell estate, 100 conversations fluttered like moths around chandeliers, polished surfaces, and hollow laughter. Waiters in crisp uniforms weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and canapes, careful not to brush against the glittering gowns and designer suits of high society. Emma Brooks adjusted her black apron, her feet aching in the budget flats she wore beneath her uniform. Her hair was pinned neatly, her makeup just enough to pass inspection from the event coordinator, but her eyes were distant. This wasn't her world. It never had been. She was only here to pay off hospital bills and maybe scrape together rent for the next 2 months. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She excused herself from the main room, slipping through a side hallway and out onto the rear patio, where the noise softened into a low murmur behind thick glass doors. The cold air bit into her skin as she pressed the phone to her ear. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. Her mother's voice was weak but warm. They spoke briefly, just enough to reassure one another that everything was all right, even though it wasn't. The medication was running low again. "I'll figure something out," Emma promised before hanging up. As she lowered the phone, she felt a shift in the air. Someone was watching her. She turned. He stood just beyond the edge of the patio lights, his tailored tuxedo immaculate, a champagne glass dangling from long fingers. His face was striking, sharp cheekbones, piercing eyes, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. He wasn't leering or sneering. He looked desperate. "I'm sorry," Emma said automatically, thinking she had wandered where she shouldn't. He took a step closer. "You work the event?" His voice was smooth but tight. She nodded slowly, suddenly wary. "Is something wrong?" The man glanced toward the ballroom, then back at her. His jaw clenched and his voice dropped, urgent and quiet. "I need a favor, a huge one. It'll sound insane, but I need you to pretend to be my wife. Just for the next few hours." Emma stared at him. "Excuse me." He stepped into the light. That's when she recognized him. Ethan Blackwell, the host, the billionaire, the face behind Blackwell Holdings. The man who owned this estate, the land it stood on, and possibly half the guests inside. He ran a hand through his hair. "Please, I'll explain. I swear it's not a joke. I need this right now. Tonight." Her first instinct was to walk away. This had to be some rich man's twisted idea of entertainment. But he didn't have the gleam of arrogance in his eyes. He looked like a man drowning in a sea of suits and secrets, and for some reason, he had reached for her hand. Emma folded her arms. "You want me, a waitress, to pretend to be your wife in front of your millionaire friends? What?" His breath caught. He looked down, then met her eyes again with something raw in his expression. "Because my enemies are here tonight, and they smell blood. If they think I'm alone, it could cost me everything." Silence stretched between them. Emma's heart pounded. It was madness, completely absurd. But behind the madness was something terrifyingly real. She nodded once. "All right, I'll do it." Ethan blinked, almost disbelieving. Then a smile, brief and unguarded, flashed across his face. "Thank you." Before she could think too hard about what she'd just agreed to, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and spoke rapidly into it. "Bring the car around. We need a dress, now." "Wait, what?" she asked, stepping back. He was already guiding her toward the driveway. "You can't walk in there like this. Not as my wife." She looked down at her plain black uniform, smudged from trays and tablecloths, then back up at him. You really think a dress will make me believable? Ethan opened the door to his sleek black Mercedes and met her gaze. No, but I think you will. And just like that, the engine roared to life. The world shifted on its axis, and Emma Brooks stepped into a lie she couldn't begin to understand, a lie that would change everything. The Mercedes purred through the midnight streets like a panther, sleek, silent, dangerous. Emma sat stiffly in the passenger seat, clutching the edge of her seat belt like it was a lifeline. The man beside her, Ethan Blackwell, was calm, too calm, like someone used to commanding chaos with a glance. One hand rested casually on the steering wheel while the other scrolled through his phone. You don't have to keep looking at me like I've kidnapped you, he said, breaking the silence. I'm still trying to figure out if you have, Emma replied dryly, eyes darting to the tinted window, then back to him. This whole thing is completely insane. I know, Ethan said, but I'm telling you, it's necessary. She studied him. His jaw was tense, his shoulders rigid beneath the fine cut of his tuxedo. Whatever this was, it wasn't a joke to him. That didn't make it less insane. He tucked his phone away and turned to her, voice lower now. The boutique is 5 minutes away. You'll walk in as you, and walk out as my wife. Emma let out a breath. Is that supposed to sound romantic? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Almost. It's supposed to sound fast. They pulled into a gated shopping district, silent and glittering under golden lights. Everything was closed except one storefront that still glowed with warm light from within. Maison Dior, a name she'd only seen in fashion magazines and fairy tales. As they stepped out, a smartly dressed woman in all black opened the boutique's glass doors before they could knock. She nodded once at Ethan. Mr. Blackwell, your selections are ready. Emma blinked. Selections? Inside, it was like stepping into another universe, one stitched together with satin and silk. Gowns shimmered under chandelier lighting, arranged like museum pieces. Shoes, jewelry, clutches, each item had its own pedestal. You called ahead? Emma asked, incredulous. I have a standing account, Ethan said, not looking at her. They know my taste. And mine, she shot back. That made him pause. He finally met her eyes. No, but I'm a fast learner. The stylist ushered Emma into the dressing suite, and moments later, racks of gowns were wheeled in. Emeralds, sapphires, blacks that shimmered like oil. She stared at the fabrics as the stylist gently undressed her from her server's uniform. No offense, the woman said with a smile, but this is an upgrade. Emma couldn't argue. She tried not to think about how the dress she was stepping into probably cost more than her entire yearly rent. As the stylist zipped her up and guided her to the mirror, Emma gasped softly. The woman staring back at her wasn't a waitress. She wasn't invisible, or struggling, or ordinary. She looked like she belonged to another world, his world. The dress was a deep burgundy, with delicate beadwork around the neckline, clinging to her curves but somehow softening her presence. Her hair had been pulled into a loose updo, and subtle makeup had transformed her tired features into something elegant and ethereal. When she stepped out of the dressing area, Ethan stood at the far end of the boutique with his back to her, murmuring something to the manager. He turned and froze. His eyes flicked over her slowly, not with hunger, but with something more unsettling. Recognition, like he was seeing her for the first time. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. You approve? She asked, trying to sound casual. For a second, he didn't speak. Then he nodded once. It'll do. Emma smirked. High praise. He stepped forward and held out his hand. Ready? She took it, the brush of his skin against hers sending a confusing jolt through her chest. As I'll ever be. As they exited the boutique, Ethan handed her a velvet clutch already filled with essentials, lipstick, mints, compact, and something she didn't expect, a diamond wedding band. Emma stopped short. You're serious? If you're going to sell it, he said softly, sell all of it. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. The drive back to the estate was quieter, heavier. Emma's fingers kept curling around the ring, her heart hammering with each mile closer to the mansion. "You sure they'll believe me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "They'll believe what I tell them to believe," Ethan replied. "But don't worry, I'll be right there." As the Mercedes pulled up to the estate gates once more, the valet rushed forward. The grand ballroom loomed ahead, music spilling out like warm smoke. The car door opened. Emma hesitated. Last chance to back out. Ethan murmured beside her. She looked down at the shimmering dress, the ring on her finger, then into his unreadable eyes. And she stepped out. The lie had begun. The moment Emma stepped back into the ballroom, this time on Ethan Blackwell's arm, the world changed. Gone were the curious glances and dismissive stares she had endured as a waitress just an hour ago. Now the room turned as if on cue, all heads swiveling toward them. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Champagne flutes paused in midair. And then came the whispers, soft, sharp, and everywhere. Ethan leaned down and murmured near her ear, "They're already rewriting our history." Emma's arm tightened slightly around his. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "That depends," he replied, "on how well we perform." With that, they descended fully into the lion's den. The sea of guests parted before them like a silk curtain. A few smiled warmly, others with calculated curiosity. Faces glowed under the soft chandeliers, their expressions masks of politeness, envy, or suspicion. These were the elite, the kind of people who didn't just own companies, they owned futures. And tonight, she was one of them, or so they were meant to believe. Ethan guided her with ease, his hand firm but never forceful at the small of her back. He moved like someone who had spent his whole life performing, every gesture precise, every smile perfectly measured. "Smile when I smile," he had told her earlier. Let them believe they're seeing something they weren't supposed to see. They were halfway across the room when the first wolf stepped forward. Gregory Hale, tall, gray-haired, and dressed in a tuxedo that screamed old money, intercepted them like a shadow with teeth. His smile was thin and cold, his voice smoother than the whiskey in his glass. "Ethan, what a surprise," Hale said, eyeing Emma with interest. "And this must be your wife," Ethan said coolly before Emma could even open her mouth. Hale's eyes didn't leave hers. "Your wife? Funny, I don't remember hearing about a wedding." "It was private," Ethan replied smoothly. "Very private." Emma extended her hand, praying her palm wasn't sweating. "Emma Blackwell," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Hale shook it briefly. His handshake was light, too light, like he was testing her. "Lovely to meet you." "And what do you do, Mrs. Blackwell?" Emma smiled sweetly. "I paint." "Paint," Hale repeated, then turned back to Ethan with a smirk. "How wonderfully bohemian of you." Ethan didn't rise to the bait. "Art adds value to any investment. I believe you've said that yourself, Greg." Hill's expression twitched. Then, with a mocking raise of his glass, he slipped away into the crowd. Emma exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Ethan leaned in, his breath brushing her temple. "You did well." "Who is that?" she asked quietly. "Gregory Hale," he said. "He's been circling my company for years, waiting for a crack. And you think me being your wife fixes that? I think it closes the crack, or at least buys me time. I want them to think I'm not lonely. It makes them nervous. They'll assume I have a secret backup they can't see." They continued their circuit through the ballroom. Emma began to notice how the room bent around Ethan, not just with admiration, but with wariness. He was powerful, yes, but solitary. And now suddenly he wasn't. She was the unknown factor, and that made her dangerous. She caught bits of whispered conversation. "When did they get married? I thought he was seeing that gallery owner in Manhattan. She looks young. Do you think it's real?" She clung to Ethan's arm, nodded when she should, laughed when he did. Each step felt like a waltz across a tightrope. Then came the moment she dreaded, a slow dance. A jazz trio began playing near the stage. The lights dimmed slightly, and couples filtered onto the floor. Ethan turned to her and extended his hand again, formal, graceful. I haven't danced in a long time, she hesitated. Just follow my lead, he said gently. The moment they stepped into the rhythm, the noise around them faded. He was a good dancer, better than she expected. One hand clasped hers, the other rested lightly at her waist. He guided her effortlessly, like they had been dancing together for years. For a moment, she forgot it was a lie. I should warn you, she said softly. I have 2 left feet. You hide it well, he murmured, eyes locked on hers. They moved as the room watched, and Emma could feel it. The press of eyes, the tension, the disbelief. But there was also something else, a ripple of something raw and unspoken, a shift in the atmosphere. For those few minutes, people weren't questioning the story. They were buying it, believing in it, believing in them. When the song ended, Ethan held her gaze a second longer than necessary. Then he dipped his head and kissed her cheek, so softly it could have been mistaken for affection or something more. The moment his lips touched her skin, Emma felt something inside her chest flutter and fall. She hadn't expected that. She wasn't supposed to feel anything, but it felt real. Too real. They stepped off the floor, and a young woman with sleek blonde hair and a sapphire choker approached. Her smile was bright, but clearly rehearsed. I don't believe we've met. I'm Candace Hale, Gregory's daughter. Ah, so this was the next wave of attack. Emma shook her hand, polite but wary. Emma. Candace leaned in slightly, her voice honeyed and sharp. He always did like surprises. But marriage, that's fast. Do you know how many women have tried to tie Ethan down? Ethan stepped forward smoothly, his hands settling at Emma's waist. She didn't try, he said, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. I chose her. Candace blinked, then smiled again, thinner this time. Well, best of luck, then. Marrying a Blackwell is like drinking poison from a crystal glass. Beautiful, but deadly. With that, she turned and walked away. Emma looked up at him. Your social circle is terrifying. They think love is just another merger, he said, handing her a flute of champagne. They don't believe in anything that isn't leveraged. And do you? He held her eyes for a long beat. I want to. That night, after the party finally ended and the guests disappeared into black tie shadows, Ethan walked her through the quiet hallways of his estate toward the private wing. He stopped at a closed door. This will be your room, he said. Separate rooms? She asked before she could stop herself. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his gaze. We're pretending to be married, Emma, not actually married. And yet, when she entered the room alone, dressed like a queen, her heart was still racing. Not from fear, but from something far more dangerous, hope. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the high-ceilinged guest room through sheer ivory curtains. Emma stirred in the enormous bed, a sea of white linen and pillows, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Then she spotted the dress from the night before, draped neatly over a velvet chaise. Reality returned in a sharp breath. She sat up slowly, her heart still processing the lie that had carried her through the gala. Somehow she had gone from serving drinks and scuffed shoes to pretending to be married to one of the most powerful men in the city, all in the span of an hour. Worse, somewhere between the boutique and that slow dance, she had started to enjoy it. A knock sounded. She opened the door to a maid in a crisp uniform. Mr. Blackwell requests your presence in the breakfast atrium, ma'am. Ma'am. Emma nearly laughed, but instead nodded and thanked her. She changed into a simple, elegant blouse and slacks that had been placed in the closet. Everything fit perfectly. Of course it did. The breakfast atrium was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. Autumn leaves casting golden shadows across the marble floor. A long table was set for 2, fresh fruit, coffee, warm pastries. Ethan stood at the window, hands in his pockets, dressed in a charcoal button-down and no tie. More relaxed, but no less commanding. You clean up fast, he said without turning. Emma raised a brow as she approached. You realize I haven't agreed to be your fake wife again, right? He finally turned and offered her a cup of coffee. Sit. She did, reluctantly. He poured orange juice for himself and took the seat across from her. I meant what I said last night, he began. Gregory Hale isn't finished. He'll start poking around, looking for weak spots. Emma sipped her coffee, watching him carefully. So you want me to keep pretending? For how long? 1 month, Ethan said without hesitation. You'll live here. Appear in public with me at a few events. Play the role of Mrs. Blackwell whenever necessary. She folded her arms. And in return, I pay you $100,000, he said. It's compensation for your time and privacy. You'll also receive a clothing allowance, a car and driver, security if needed, and I'll pay your mother's medical bills. He said it like it was nothing. For Emma, it was everything. Still, she had to ask. And when the month is up, we part ways, Ethan said, expression unreadable. Clean and simple. You'll have enough to do whatever you want. It was the kind of offer that changed lives, but it also felt like a trap. Golden, yes, but still a cage. You don't even know me, she said. I know enough, he replied. You didn't hesitate to help a stranger. You're smart enough to keep your mouth shut in a room full of billionaires. And you're desperate, but not the kind that steals or lies. You're the kind that survives. The words hit deeper than she expected. She lowered her gaze. What if I say no? You won't, he said quietly. You're too smart to walk away from something this easy. Easy? She scoffed. You want me to fake a marriage under the noses of the richest, most manipulative people in the country? That's not easy, Ethan. That's dangerous. He nodded. Yes, but you're already halfway through the fire. Might as well walk through it and collect the reward. She looked out at the garden, shimmering under the morning sun. A month, 1 month of pretending, of living a lie that had started to feel dangerously close to the truth. What are the rules? She asked at last. I'll have something drafted by noon, he said, lips curving faintly. Later that afternoon, a sleek man in a navy suit arrived at the estate. Mr. Cartwright, Ethan's personal attorney, presented Emma with a contract as thick as a novella. No romantic obligations, she read aloud. That's oddly specific. Cartwright didn't flinch. Mr. Blackwell is a professional. He has no intention of misleading or exploiting your role. That clause protects both parties. Emma flipped through the pages. Financial terms, confidentiality, non-disclosure. Intense, but airtight. At the final page, her hand hovered over the pen. You're sure about this? She asked Ethan, who stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. Are you? He countered. 1 month. 1 lie. 1 chance to save her mother, and maybe her future. She signed. By the next morning, Emma was no longer just a guest in the Blackwell estate. She was its mistress, at least in appearance. She had her own suite, a closet full of designer clothing, and a personal assistant named Isla, terrifyingly efficient. Mrs. Blackwell, Isla said briskly, your itinerary includes a charity brunch with the Langfords on Thursday and a gallery opening Friday. Mr. Blackwell would like you to be seen, but not too seen. Too seen? Emma asked. Convincing, but not clingy, Isla clarified. The media eats desperate wives alive. Emma huffed a laugh. Got it. Trophy wife, but not too shiny. Isla didn't smile. That night, over dinner in the private dining room, Emma asked the question gnawing at her. Why me? Ethan didn't look up from his wine. I told you. I needed someone who wouldn't screw this up. You could have hired an actress. Someone trained to play the part. He met her gaze. An actress would act. You're not acting. You're surviving. That's more believable. Something twisted in her stomach. It should have felt empowering. Instead, it felt like being known too deeply, too quickly. She changed the subject. Is this the part where we learn things about each other for the cameras? He chuckled softly. Maybe. Favorite color? Orange. Favorite food? Street tacos. Biggest fear? She hesitated. Drowning. Yours. Falling in love, he said. It was so direct, so sharp, it sliced through the room. Silverware against porcelain was the only sound. That's a little dramatic, she said. It always is, he replied. Right up until it ruins you. She didn't respond. For the first time, she realized something she hadn't expected. Ethan Blackwell wasn't pretending to be guarded. He was guarded, completely. And somehow, she'd been handed the keys to a door no one had opened in a long time. The rain started just after midnight. Emma stood barefoot on her balcony, cool wind whispering against her silk robe as she stared out at the quiet city, sleeping, oblivious to the charade she was tangled in. Raindrops tapped the stone railing, soft and steady, as if the world was reminding her she was far from home. Behind her, the room glowed with lamplight. An untouched book sat on the nightstand, a witness to her restless thoughts. She should have been asleep. Instead, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Ethan Blackwell, the man whose name carried power like a thunderstorm, whose guarded eyes held stories he refused to tell. Every time he looked at her, she felt it, the weight of something buried, a wound that had never fully closed. The hallway outside her suite was empty. She padded quietly toward the library, the only place she knew she could be alone without staff. But as she pushed open the tall oak doors, she froze. He was already there. Ethan, in a leather armchair by the fire, a glass of scotch in one hand, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. "Can't sleep?" he asked, voice low. "Not even close." He gestured to the chair across from him. She hesitated, then crossed the room and sat. The fire crackled, casting gold shadows across dark wood and velvet curtains. For a while, they didn't speak. Two people who didn't know how to be alone anymore, and didn't quite know how to be together, either. Softly, Emma asked, "Who hurt you?" His fingers tightened around the glass. "That obvious, huh? You wear it like armor," she said. A long pause. "For years ago, we were engaged. Her name was Elise." Emma leaned in slightly. She was beautiful, ambitious, charming. Everyone loved her, especially the board. He gave a humorless laugh. They saw her as the perfect accessory, polished, press-ready. "She made me look human." "What happened?" "She was working with Gregory Hale," he said. Emma's stomach turned. She fed him inside information. Leaked confidential deals. "She used our engagement to get into my inner circle, then nearly handed Hale the power to dismantle my company." "You were betrayed," Emma whispered. He looked at her then, not angry, but hollowed out. "She didn't just betray me. She humiliated me. At a press event, she announced she was leaving me to start her own firm with Hale. Reporters ate it up. I was the fool billionaire who didn't see the knife." He took a slow sip, eyes distant. "I nearly lost everything." "That's why you hate Hale?" she murmured. "He uses people as weapons," Ethan said. "And with this merger coming up, he's painting me as unstable, reckless, unfit to lead." "So you married a waitress to prove him wrong," Emma said softly. He met her eyes, softer now. "I didn't marry a waitress. I asked a woman who didn't owe me a damn thing to step into the fire with me. And she did, without blinking." "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I know. But you did it anyway." Silence again. The fire crackled, warm and constant. "Come with me," he said at last, standing. "Where?" He only held out his hand. Emma hesitated, then placed her hand in his. He led her down a side corridor she hadn't noticed before, down a flight of stairs into a private wing. At the end of a narrow hall stood double doors. Ethan opened them. Inside was a gallery, not public, but personal. The walls were lined with paintings, some abstract, some breathtakingly emotional. Emma's eyes widened. "These are all yours. Collected over the years," he said. "But this room." He walked to the far wall where 5 canvases stood blank. "This one's for you." She blinked. "What?" "I saw your old blog. The sketches on your phone. You stopped painting. I want you to start again." "Ethan, you don't have to. I'm not offering charity," he interrupted gently. "I'm offering you a space to be seen. The world should see what I see in you." Her throat closed up. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you're the first thing in a long time that's made me want to build something again." Their eyes locked. The air shifted. He reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, fingers lingering a second too long. "You said no romantic obligations," she whispered. "I did," he said. "But that doesn't mean I'm made of stone." His hand fell. Emma turned to the blank canvases. "I don't know if I can still do it," she admitted. "You can," he said. "And you will, when you're ready." She nodded, fingers already itching for a brush she hadn't touched in over 2 years. That night, back in her room, Emma couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, but because something inside her had started to wake up, something numb and silent for far too long. As she stared at the diamond ring on her finger, pretend, glittering, impossible, she realized something even more dangerous. This arrangement was no longer just about survival. It was becoming something she wanted. The next week passed in a beautiful blur. Emma slipped into the rhythm of the role more easily than she expected, smiling at the right people, learning the names of CEOs and their spouses, wearing dresses that felt like armor and heels that made her taller than her doubts. By day, she painted in the hidden gallery Ethan had given her. By night, they stood side by side, husband and wife, at events, dinners, interviews, even a photo shoot for a luxury lifestyle magazine. The press ate it up. Ethan Blackwell's secret wedding to mystery artist. Who is Emma Blackwell? Is Ethan finally settling down? The story, though fake, was golden. But inside the lie, something real was beginning to take root. Late-night conversations that drifted into morning. Soft laughter in the kitchen while she cooked, and he awkwardly tried to help. Quiet glances that lingered too long. Moments that didn't feel scripted. And then there were the kisses. The first few had been for show, on the cheek, on the hand, soft and public. But the fourth kiss outside the gala in Central Park, when they thought no one was looking, was different. His lips pressed to hers with purpose, and she kissed him back, not because the cameras demanded it, but because something inside her craved it. When they pulled apart, breathless, eyes searching, no one said a word. That kiss changed everything. 2 nights later, Ethan received a call. It was nearly midnight. Emma was already in her room, sketching by the window, when she heard his voice from down the hall. Low, sharp, tense. She opened her door, stepped into the hallway, and followed the sound to his office. The door was slightly ajar. "I don't care what he's planning." Ethan snapped into the phone. "We're controlling the narrative. No leaks." A pause. "Find out where the damn photos came from. And if Hale is behind this, I want him burned." Emma stepped back quietly, heart pounding. Photos. The next day, it broke. Someone had leaked her employment file from the catering company, her application, job history, hourly wage, and with it a grainy photo of her in a black apron, balancing a tray of champagne at the very party where she met Ethan. Mrs. Blackwell, wife or well-placed waitress. From riches to rags and back, Emma's secret past. The media swarmed. Paparazzi flooded the estate gates. News vans camped outside Blackwell Tower. Social media exploded. Hashtag Blackwell scandal, hashtag wife for hire, hashtag gold diggergate. Emma stared at the headlines with shaking hands. The photos were everywhere. Her face, her uniform. The timeline, the math, it was obvious. Too obvious. The fairy tale had cracked. Ethan burst into her suite before she could speak. His jaw was locked. His eyes, storm dark. "This wasn't supposed to happen." "I didn't tell anyone," she said quickly. "I swear." "I know," he interrupted. "This was Hale. He's been waiting for this." She stood there in her robe, exposed and humiliated. "So what now? What do we do?" Ethan looked at her, and for the first time there was something defeated in his posture, something that didn't match the man who always had a backup plan. "I don't know," he said. It landed like a brick between them. "I was never supposed to feel anything," he added quietly. That was the deal. 1 month. No complications. Emma stared at him, her voice cracking. And yet, here we are. That night, the PR team scrambled to clean the mess. They crafted statements, arranged interviews, tried to spin it as a whirlwind love story, but nothing worked. The press didn't want love. They wanted a scandal. Ethan's board began pressuring him to step back from public appearances. Sponsors pulled out of the merger deal. The cracks weren't just showing, they were gaping. In 1 week, everything he had built was collapsing, and he was losing her, too. Emma stood by the window that evening, arms crossed, staring at the ring on her finger. It didn't feel like part of the lie anymore. It felt like a promise, but a promise they could no longer keep. She turned when he entered the room. "I should go," she said before he could speak. "You're losing everything because of me." "No," he said instantly, stepping forward. "I made the choice. You were the best part of it. You don't have to say that." "I'm not." He looked tired, older, worn in a way she hadn't seen before. "You once asked why I didn't hire an actress," he said. "I told you, because you're not fake. You're real. And that's exactly why this is falling apart. Because somewhere along the line, I stopped pretending." She blinked. "Ethan." He reached out, then stopped himself. "I wanted to protect you, but instead I dragged you into a war you didn't ask for." Emma nodded slowly. "Then let me end it." She took off the ring, set it gently in his palm, turned, and walked away. Outside, the rain had started again. She didn't wait for a car. She didn't ask for a goodbye. She just left, because the masquerade wasn't just falling apart. It had shattered completely. And nothing, not even love, could be built on broken glass. It had been 43 days since Emma left the Blackwell estate. Not that she was counting, but every morning her fingers reached for a ring that wasn't there. Her eyes searched for someone who never arrived, and her heart, stubborn, reckless thing, kept whispering his name like a secret prayer. Ethan. She was back in her old apartment now, the one-bedroom walk-up with uneven floors and windows that rattled when it rained. She'd returned the dresses, the jewelry, the car, everything but the sketch pad Ethan had once slipped into her hand and whispered, "Start again." And so she did. She painted for hours, for days, until her fingers ached and the canvases stained with something deeper than color, something closer to grief. But somewhere in all that pain, something bloomed. Her work, raw, emotional, untamed, was noticed. First by a small gallery in Soho, then by a critic who called it the visual equivalent of heartbreak written in brushstrokes. People came. People bought. Suddenly, she wasn't surviving anymore. She was living, but none of it silenced the ache he left behind. On the night of her first solo exhibit, the ghosts finally caught up. The gallery was alive with soft jazz and clinking glasses, filled with strangers who knew her name. Her paintings lined the walls, each one a chapter of the masquerade she'd lived. One canvas in particular drew a crowd, a faceless man standing in the rain, hand outstretched, waiting for someone just out of frame. She titled it simply Almost. Emma stood near the back, overwhelmed. Her hair was curled, her dress a soft champagne silk. She smiled and nodded and thanked people, but her soul wasn't in the room. It was still with him. She turned to slip away for air and froze. He was standing in the doorway. Ethan, drenched from the rain, collar unbuttoned. A man who looked like he'd walked through hell to be here. He met her eyes across the crowd, and just like that, the room fell away. He didn't move at first. Neither did she. Time stretched like canvas between them, blank, waiting to be filled. Then she took a step, and so did he. They met in the center of the gallery under the glow of her name printed on the wall. Emma Brooks, unmasked. Neither of them spoke. Not at first. "You left," his voice said at last. "You let me," she whispered back. The pain in his eyes was visible. "I didn't know how to keep you without destroying you. And I didn't know how to stay without losing myself," she replied. They stood inches apart, the crowd watching but distant. Her breath hitched as she noticed what he held in his hand, a ring box. Her ring, the one she had left behind in his palm. "You said once that love ruins people," she said softly. "I lied," Ethan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's losing love that ruins you. I learned that the second you walked out." Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought I was just a story to you, a cover, a performance." He shook his head. You were the only part of it that was real. Then he dropped to one knee, right there in the middle of her gallery, in front of strangers, cameras, her past, and his future. Emma Brooks, he said, voice shaking, you were never part of my plan. But you became my reason, my anchor, my beginning. And if you'll let me, I want you to be my end, too. He opened the box. The ring sparkled under the gallery lights, simple, timeless, familiar. Her breath caught. Her heart cracked open. And then she laughed through the tears, through the disbelief. Because of course he would ruin everything with the most beautiful thing he'd ever said. She dropped to her knees too, cupping his face in her hands. I don't need a masquerade anymore, she said. Just you. Ethan kissed her. No press, no photographers, no expectations. Just lips and truth and the salt of shared tears. And the room, for once, applauded for something real. 1 year later, Emma painted a piece titled Home. A garden terrace, soft light, and two figures standing close, one reaching for the other, and this time the other reaching back. It hung in their living room, just above the fireplace, not as a reminder of how it all began, but as a promise of everything they were building together, and the battles they would continue to fight together. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.